Good morning and welcome to the first Housing Our Future webinar of 2024. My name is Kristen Baker. I'm the Executive Director of LISC Greater Cincinnati, and we are so happy to have you all here today to hear more information about the new property tax valuation and its impact on taxes. So we have a wonderful panel. We're really so thrilled to have so many important leaders in this space here to provide this information. And I do just want to state up front, this is informational only. We will not be able to address specific homeowner questions or property needs at this webinar. There are some resources that we will be sharing throughout, where if you are a homeowner and you have specific questions, you might be able to engage and secure some information and support there. Also, the views expressed on this panel discussion belong solely to the speakers and do not represent the view of any other panelists or LISC as the host. So homeownership is really something that in Housing Our Future, we have identified as a top priority. We know that homeownership is the primary vehicle for generational wealth, for neighborhoods to continue to thrive and grow. And it's really an important aspect of the priorities of the city and the county. So thinking about how we provide more resources and information to existing homeowners, it also complements our ability to add new homeowners to the community should that be desired. So we're really excited again to talk to you all today about this topic. We know it's dense and it's complicated, so I think you're going to find this incredibly informative. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to our moderator, Rhonda Holyfield-Mangieri. Rhonda.
Thank you so much, Kristen, and good morning, everyone. In today's session, we will hear from the Hamilton County Auditor and the Hamilton County Treasurer. They will share information about the most recent 2023 real estate property tax reappraisal process, which was mandated by Ohio state law. And they will share information on how reappraisals are impacting property taxes for homeowners throughout the county. Derek Mays of the National Appraisal Bias Task Force will discuss the Board of Revision process to challenge the property valuation. And Stacy Purcell from the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio will share information on resources available to homeowners and the opportunities to advocate for change in the state law. The session will cover topics including the Board of Revision, tax payment plans, the Homestead Exemption, and other resources available to support homeowners. And now I would like to introduce the panelists. First, Bridget Kelly. Bridget began her service as Hamilton County Auditor in March 2023. In this role, she is the county's Chief Financial Officer and Real Property Assessor, and works on a number of other responsibilities as assigned by the legislator. Jill A. Schiller is the first woman to serve as Hamilton County Treasurer. She took office in 2021 after a career in management and communications consultant. Derek Mays has been actively engaged in the appraisal of real estate in Hamilton County since 1989. He has served on multiple CDCs and communities such as West End, College Hill, and Bond Hill, and currently serves on the State Director Appraisal Bias Task Force. And Stacy is a staff attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Southwest Ohio. She represents low-income homeowners who are at risk of losing their homes due to mortgage or property tax foreclosures. Their bios are available at www.list.org, their full bios. So thank you, panelists, for being here. And now I'd like to call on Stacy. The countywide average valuation increase does not reflect the full story of how the increase in property values is affecting our communities. And Stacy will share information with us about that. Stacy, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rhonda. So like Rhonda said, this last year was a historic year for property valuation overall in Hamilton County. The average county increase was 34% in valuation, but that 34% really doesn't show the full picture of what's happening in our neighborhoods. So this map is based on data that you can find at the Hamilton County Auditor's website. that shows the percentage increase in property valuation in the last year for our Cincinnati neighborhoods. And the neighborhoods with the darkest blue are the ones that had the highest increase. The neighborhoods, for those of you who can't look at the map and just name all 52 without the labels, the ones that had the highest increase are East Westwood, Camp Washington, East Price Hill, English Woods, Evanston, Roselawn, South Fairmont, West End, West Price Hill, and Westwood. You can also find this information on the auditor's website for our county neighborhoods in Hamilton County. And some of the county neighborhoods that had the highest increase in valuation are Lincoln Heights, Addiston, and Mount Healthy. So you can see that some of these neighborhoods that had these highest increases are also our neighborhoods that have been historically undervalued, under-resourced in Hamilton County. They're the ones that saw high foreclosure rates during the Great Recessions. And they're also some of our neighborhoods that are seeing the highest rates of development right now of institutional investors and gentrification. And that development, as the auditor will get into more, is how we track the valuation and assign valuation, but there's macro effects of what is happening in our neighborhoods. We need to keep in mind as we're thinking about how this is affecting homeowners on the ground. Also, I want folks to know that we are not here to say that these neighborhoods shouldn't be increasing in value, that they shouldn't be valued accurately. Valuation is a way that homeowners build wealth, but the concern with these really high, rapid increases in valuation is that it will then affect the increase in your property taxes. And it's going to make these neighborhoods, or that's a very high risk of making these neighborhoods unaffordable for our low-income homeowners, our legacy homeowners, the ones who have been living in these neighborhoods for a really long time, holding down the neighborhoods, the anchors of their communities, and now suddenly their valuation is increasing, their property taxes are increasing. They may not be able to afford to stay there.
Stacy, thank you so much for speaking to the neighborhood property valuation. Now we'll turn it over to our auditor, Bridget, who would give us the information on how the real estate valuation process works. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with all of you this morning. We have a couple slides that we're going to go through just to talk a little bit about the process of valuation. Excuse me. So this is a timeline that lays out the state mandated timeline for reappraisal. Hamilton County this year is in a full reappraisal process, which means you have to physically view every parcel of property in Hamilton County, of which there are over 350,000. So we've been working on this for over 2 years. We have a great team in the auditor's office. We've also contracted with another firm that is on an approved list from the state of Ohio in order to make sure that we have the person power to be able to finish this project in a timely manner. So in the summer, we submitted our tentative values to the state, who has to approve those. After that, we sent those notices to property owners to give them a sense of what they might be facing. This is not something that's required by the state, but rather something that we do as a courtesy to homeowners. In other counties, the notice that your value changes comes from the tax bill that you receive in the mail from the treasurer. Following the tentative value notices, we continue to do our work to try to make sure that we have the most accurate valuation possible for property owners in Hamilton County. We resubmit our values to the state, who then approves our final values. And that happened late in December. So property tax bills are calculated using that new value. And I know we've had some questions where people say, the state says it's every 6 years. Every 6 years, we have to make a physical inspection of the properties where we look at the outside. It's a little bit different, and I think Derek's going to talk about this a little bit. It's a little bit different than if you want to get a loan from a bank, for example, to buy a house, where they may come in and look at every nook and cranny of your house. We simply don't have the people or the resources to do that. Every county in the state uses this mass appraisal approach. So Following the final values, which you can find on our website at hamiltoncountyauditor.org, folks have the opportunity provided by state law. This is the recourse that property owners have for an appeal. It's the Board of Revision process. You'll hear more about that later in this presentation. The most important thing to know is the Board of Revision is made up of the auditor, the treasurer, the president of the county commission, or our designees. The filing period for that is from January 1st until March 31st. That is set forth in state law. We do not have flexibility to change these dates to offer extensions or anything like that. So as you can see from this whole process, the state tells us when to do our reappraisal. They tell us essentially how to do our reappraisal, and then they also approve our values. So if we can go on to the next slide, that would be great. So we work in values, not in taxes. So the most important thing that the auditor's office tries to do is work transparently and accurately to make sure that people have an accurate valuation of their house. So we try to compare apples to apples. I know we get a lot of calls from people that say, well, my neighbor has X and, what about me? But it's different depending house to house. And it can change from new construction. I know we've had people call our office that say, I've made some improvements to my house, but we haven't done anything besides add a garage, knock out some walls, and totally redo our kitchens. These are all things that might have an impact on your value. So how does your value impact the calculation of taxes owed? Well, your property taxes are calculated partially on value, but that's not the only thing that they're calculated on. Communities make decisions about what's important to them when they decide whether or not to pass levies. We also have an unconstitutional school funding formula that's over-reliant on property taxes. That is something that happens at the state legislature, and I know we'll be talking a little bit more about advocacy. So, the auditor's office, we work as an arm of the state legislature, but we unfortunately don't have the authority to change laws, to make exceptions, or to do anything outside of what has been prescribed to us and directed to us through the state legislature. So if you have an increase in fair market value, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll have the same increase in your property taxes. For example, if your property taxes go up if your property value goes up 5%, it doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes will go up by 5%. It could vary. Your taxes could go up, your taxes could stay about the same, your value could go down, and your taxes could go up. In most cases, voted levies in Ohio have what are called reduction factors. So when voters pass levies, they are guaranteed to generate a certain amount of money, and they will generate that regardless of the fluctuation in values. And I will say this is not something that is unique to Hamilton County. This is something that has happened all across the state. We are seeing property values go up pretty significantly all around the entire state. There are some more fluctuations with value when it comes to either levies that are not on the reduction factor or for 20 mil floor schools. But these are issues, again, that I would encourage people to talk about with their state legislators, because that is the body who makes decisions about the policies and structure of property taxes. So if we can move on to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the tools that we have on our website. So one of the most useful things that we have, you can go to hamiltoncountyauditor.org, search for your parcel of property, and click on tax distributions. When you click on that tax distributions tab, it will tell you exactly where your tax obligations go and how much. We have an additional feature on there this year, so you can see tax year 2022 payable 2023 and tax year 2023 payable 2024. And those are available so that you can do a comparison if you like to. Again, we try to be transparent and accurate in the work that we do. There's a lot of great information on there. If you check out your parcel on our website, you can see if you're getting the homestead exemption, for example. You can see if you're getting the owner occupied credit, for example, and you can learn a lot about the information that we have on record for your property. We've had people that have called us and said, hey, you've got it wrong. I don't have a garage, or I do have a garage. And so we appreciate that. The bad news is we can't just fix that right now. We have to go through the Board of Revision process in order to make those corrections. So again, go to hamiltoncountyauditor.org, click on tax distributions, and that will show you exactly where your tax obligations go. And if we'll go to the next slide, we could talk about the homestead. So the homestead exemption is a program that is through the state. So it is administered by the auditor's office, but it is a state program. The state legislators are the people with the ability to expand income limits, eligibility, things like that. If you search your parcel of property on our website at hamiltoncountyauditor.org, you can see if you're enrolled in the homestead program right now. Sometimes we'll get calls from people that say, hey, my neighbor says, that they're in the homestead program, but I don't think they're eligible. That information doesn't roll off until the following tax year. So sometimes what you're looking at isn't the most up to date. Previously, there were no income limitations for the homestead exemption. So there are some people who are actually grandfathered into this program. The legislature did just expand the income limitations for this program, and there is conversation about expanding it further. But again, this is another opportunity for advocacy at the state level, because that's who makes the changes to the homestead exemption. So with that, I'll look forward to questions later, and we'll turn it back over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I will check in to see if Jill is ready now, our Hamilton County Treasurer. All right. Jill is having some technical problems, so we'll move on to Derek, who will cover some of the challenges in determining values through the mass appraisal process. So Derek, I'll turn it over to you now.
Good morning. Thank everyone for participating in this great webinar opportunity. We're going to share a little bit about the mass appraisal process. And we hope that in sharing that information, homeowners will be able to use some techniques and be able to provide them some resources to help them understand how they may be able to intercede on the increased property values. The first thing we want to mention is that the process, the Board of Revisions process, is in most cases a legal process. And therefore, it's really incumbent upon the property owner to secure the evidence needed to hopefully change their property value. And that evidence starts with the things that are right there in the home, or maybe not in the home. The auditor, as she mentioned, they did not go in your home, so therefore they don't know the true condition. And it's not their fault. It's just the way the system is set up. The system is set up based on that in each county, 88 of them, each auditor has to assess a certain number of properties. As Bridget mentioned, there's about 350,000 or so properties in Hamilton County. So they don't use the normal, when I say normal, the fee appraisal process, which would ultimately cause the county to have to pay an exorbitant amount of cost to get all the internal inspections done to do a fee appraisal. So let me show you with the numbers. And I'm just going to use this as an average, just so you just understand how costly it would be. At 300,000 parcels of property in Hamilton County, and we know there's 385 or more, 358, but if we went with 300,000 and we charged the typical appraisal fee of about $400, that would cost the county about $120 million to actually complete that process. So the mechanism that they use, the mass appraisal process, has its flaws because it only allows us to see the outside of the property. So what we have to do is we have to really dig into any repairs, any condition issues, anything that can affect the value. It could be even a crack in the foundation. So those things need to be gathered as evidence so that we can prepare a case. The Board of Revisions process is basically a case process, meaning that it's a legal process. And without evidence, there is no real way to get the value changed. And so what we offer in our mechanism is to be able to find out how apples to apples work. Can we go to slide 2? So the apples to apples process looks like all apples are the same, but they're not. Sometimes they're oranges. And that's where the mass appraisal process has its limitations. So we have to recognize that this process that we are under really doesn't meet every property. And that may be your property. So therefore, that's why it's important that one, you really try to distinguish what things in your property are in need of repair. And that will help with the valuation process. Apples to apples. This is really complex, and I had a very difficult time in trying to see how I could share this with this audience where they could actually get something out of it. Comps. Everybody talks about comps. What is a comp? What constitutes a comparable sale? So the acronym COMPS stands for a comparable sale. So we understand that in a comparable sale, there are certain things that make it actually comparable. One, we have to verify that sale. So every sale that happens in your neighborhood is not a comp. It may be a sale, but it may not be a comp. Appraisers typically do, the ones that understand urban markets and understand how markets change, they do a block by block analysis. So in certain neighborhoods, you have to not only look at what the whole neighborhood scenario is, you may have to determine what's going on in your block or the block over to really understand how comparable sales really impact value. And so that's one thing that we really can't talk about on this, but the objective is to get you to understand that just because the house next door sold for X doesn't make it a comparable sale. And what we want to do is be able to provide you some mechanisms that help you clearly delineate what is a comparable sale. The mass appraisal process is, I guess, the best way to state it is very complex. It's really a numbers or statistics is how they're coming up with the number. And so there's a lot of what we call in the appraisal industry or the valuation industry, there's a lot of outliers. And your home might be an outlier. But because of the way the law reads, you have to accept the value that the auditor puts on your property. And your only recourse is to challenge it at the Board of Revisions. That's it. You can complain, you can call, you can talk about your neighbor's property, but the reality of it is the only recourse you really have is to challenge it at the Board of Revisions. And that challenge comes from evidence. It's just like going to court. Bring your evidence to win your case. And so we want to let homeowners know it's really about the evidence that's going to lower your tax value. Okay. Slide number 3. The picture of the courthouse again alludes to that this is a judicial matter. It clearly states in the revised code that the Board of Revision is going to be a judicial hearing, which means it's a court case. So we're back to what evidence can you provide or bring to the court to support your case. The term used, quasi-judicial board, court-like. Again, the evidence. We recommend, and there's a host of things that's on the county auditor's page that you can bring as evidence. Of course, if your property is a shell, that's a pretty simple case. It's not the same as what they assessed it for unless they know it's a shell. It's the cases that need more detailed characteristics of the property to determine whether or not your values are above the market. So what we advise is getting a professional, someone who knows the market. Sometimes we talk about neighborhoods, but really we're talking about markets. Neighborhoods overlap. Neighborhoods have boundaries. Markets do not overlap, and they don't have boundaries. Markets are whatever the market is. Okay, so markets blend. So in some communities, there may be a blend of a market. And so therefore, we have to use processes that help us be able to determine where your property sits in that case. The other example is the auditor uses something that's called appraisal areas. So again, that solidifies a boundary. And they only do this because it's part of the mass appraisal process. So they have something, again, that's called appraisal areas. Well, if your property is in one area versus another area, your value may be different just because it's in a different area. But remember, that area could be, that line for that area could be right across the street. So you could be in a different area, just block or steps away from your neighbor's house. So again, that's the important thing that we have to understand is the process to defend your property value is to get an expert who can help you delineate where the value differences are, what the real comparable sales are in your marketplace. Every sale is not a comparable sale. So again, you have to bring your A game to the auditor so you can win your case because it's a legal case. We can go to slide number 4 in closing. How do you win your case? The best way is to have an appraisal done on your property, a fee independent appraisal. Why? An independent licensed certified appraiser is obligated to complete the report unbiasedly, which means that their license is on the line for that report. They're putting their license on the line to say that the value is XYZ. That's going to stand up to, in our view, the appraisers in the market, any mass appraisal, because the mass appraisal doesn't have the internal inspection of the property. It doesn't have the in-depth research individually for the property. And it's not going to leave out what we call outliers or other appraisal concepts. And in closing, what we really want to do is be able to help communities understand that the most important thing is to understand your property. What's in your property that has a value issue? And that's where it really starts from. The National Appraisal Bias Task Force is here to provide community outreach to helping people save their homes. And that's what our objective is, help people save their homes. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you so much for the solid guidance that you have given us. And also, thank you so much for the work that is being done through the National Appraisal Bias Task Force. And now we'll transition back to our Hamilton County Treasurer. And Jill, we're all excited to hear about what the use of our tax proceeds go to, information on our tax bill, the process, and what do we do if we cannot pay our taxes? Thanks, Jill.
Great, thank you. Good to be with you guys finally and fully, at least on the phone. So as Auditor Kelly said, our office is also an extension of the state. We administer state law primarily as specified in ORC. Oh, can we get to the next slide, please? First slide. Thank you, sorry. We administer state law as specified in the ORC, which is the Ohio Revised Code, in sections 321 and 323. So even the layout and the information on our tax bill and any information that's contained within it has to be approved by the tax commissioner, the state tax commissioner. We mail the bills physically to every parcel, and any changes to those bills need approval as well. State law says that when a payment is made after the deadline, which in this case was February 5th, a 5% penalty is assessed if it's under 10 days and 10% penalty after 10 days. It can be waived under certain circumstances, but those are pretty limited. The form for waiver is on our website at the Hamilton County Treasurer site. When we mail you a bill, which we do mail, it is considered it doesn't count if you don't receive your bill. So technically, you're supposed to know that you owe your property tax even without the bill arriving at your house. And again, that's state law. Payments can be made online, over the phone, by mail, in person at our office, or we always have a drop box in the lobby. Next slide, please. Here you're going to see 3 tax bills, and they're all valued, these parcels are all valued at the same amount. However, if you look, they're from different areas and they're same market value. Number 1 is in Terrace Park, number 2 is in Anderson, and number 3 is in Crosby. During this tax year, number 1 owed $3,623.90. Number 2, with the same market value, owed $6,187.30. And number 3, with the same market value, $4,506.93. If you look at the tax distribution, which you'll see where the red numbers are, you're going to find out that they're pretty much identical. Countywide disbursements are identical. The the zoo, the library, senior services, they're all going to be the same. The differences mainly come down to your local school district and local levies like police and fire. 30 years ago, the Ohio Supreme Court found that the way that we fund our schools is unconstitutional, and yet in the past 30 years, the state legislature has not done anything to address that. Roughly 60% of your property taxes go to pay for schools. The rest of it goes to fund the levies that you've voted in and all the agencies that benefit from tax collection on the county level. If we were to push off a due date, then that would also push off the distribution of the proceeds, meaning that our schools would not get the money that they need to operate. Next slide, please. Okay, so we understand that this bill has been hard for a lot of people, and you might not have been able to make your payment on Monday. My office is able to offer a delinquency payment plan. Sorry about that. If you have not been able to make your payment, please call the office. We can set you up for a payment plan that divides the total into roughly 5 payments over about 2.5 years. It will prevent your property from being included in the tax lien sale. And so long as you make those 5 payments and stay current on the taxes that come due in the meantime, then your delinquency will be paid off and there's no further action that'll be taken. We truly very deeply recommend, very strongly recommend that folks in this position contact legal aid. They might have funds to help you, but at the very least, they can advocate on your behalf with our office and work with us. That is unfortunately, thanks to the state, the only real product that we have at our disposal to help people who are delinquent. I am looking forward to answering your questions during the Q&A, and thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Jill. Now I'd like to transition to Stacy. Stacy, you've shared information with us about the property valuation map, and now we'd like to talk with you about the property tax map that you have available.
Thank you, Rhonda. So this map, similar to the one that showed the valuation, this one shows the increase in property taxes over the last year. You can see that, again, it is not being dispersed equally among our neighborhoods. So overall, Hamilton County saw about a 14% increase in residential property taxes. And this map is only showing residential properties. But those neighborhoods that are in the medium blue and the dark blue, they saw a 50% increase or even higher than 50% increase. The neighborhoods with the highest property tax increases are East Westwood, Camp Washington, Evanston, and English Woods. And for our county neighborhoods, you can find this information on the auditor's website. But some of the county neighborhoods that had the highest property tax increases are Lincoln Heights, Addiston, Cheviot, Elmwood, and St. Bernard. And I don't want to discount the effect that these property tax increases at any level will have for our low-income homeowners on fixed incomes, especially when you get your property tax bill and you have a limited time to send the money to the treasurer's office. You may not have budgeted as you thought you were supposed to for the last year, and suddenly you have to come up with several hundreds of dollars, if not more, to pay that property tax bill. And that's a real burden for our homeowners who are living on Social Security, fixed incomes, or working homeowners who are working low-paying jobs. I also want to mention that this map does not include the increase for homestead homeowners. So from legal aids, what we're hearing on the ground from homeowners is I'm getting the calls from our low-income seniors, our disabled homeowners, and their property tax increase is going up considerably more based on the percentage than what even these maps show. I have homeowners who are receiving the homestead exemption whose property tax bills have increased 100%, 200%. And one of the big reasons for that is because, as Bridget was mentioning, the homestead exemption is a flat rate exemption. So if your valuation increases, then that exemption becomes less valuable. Taking $26,000 off of your valuation for property tax purposes is more meaningful when your home is valued at $50,000 versus $150,000. So this map is important. It shows our neighborhoods are being affected the most, but it still doesn't even show the full picture of who is going to be most at risk of displacement for these increase in property taxes.
Okay. Thank you, Stacy. You're going to be covering our property tax assistance programs, which will be very helpful to our homeowners. Thank you.
Yes, so I want to make sure that everyone knows what resources we have available right now for homeowners who are struggling to pay their property taxes. One of the big programs that is still open is through Community Action Agency. It's called their Utility Assistance Plus program. In the past, it had been able to be used to pay things such as utility bills. Right now, they're almost out of money and it is restricted to property tax assistance. This pot of money will pay up to $10,000 per homeowner for property tax assistance if you've had a financial hardship that was due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that financial hardship is defined broadly. So it could be a decrease in income if you missed work because your job closed, if you missed work because your child's school was closed and you had to take off work to stay home with them. It can also be an increase in living expenses. Maybe you had increased food costs because you had to stay home more. Maybe you had increased utility costs or increased medical bills if you had COVID yourself. This assistance program through Community Action Agency can only be used once. So if you've received it in the past, in 2021, 22, you won't be eligible for it again. You can apply by going to that link and applying. You'll find the application on Community Action's website. You can also call Community Action Agency. We do think that this funding, it has to be used by the end of April. And it'll probably be used up quicker than that. So I encourage people to call if you think you might be eligible. The county also has money available right now through their 513 relief program. So that is again available for homeowners who have had a financial hardship. And that program will pay up to 6 months of a delinquency. So for property taxes, that means right now that it will pay 1 property tax bill worth of delinquency. So say if you missed your February bill, you couldn't pay that on Monday, this might be a good program for you if you're only 1 property tax bill behind. As Jill mentioned, Legal Aid Society is here to help represent homeowners in property tax foreclosures, homeowners who have had a property tax lien sold, but our money is pretty much tapped in our capacity. We are getting a lot of calls right now. So I certainly, if you are in foreclosure, if you are at risk of having a tax lien sold, you should still be calling legal aid, but you should also be reaching out yourselves to the Community Action Agency, to 513 Relief. You can call United Way at 211. That's a good way to get any additional resources that might be out there that I haven't talked about today. On the Housing Our Future webpage, there's a long list of housing resources, including smaller resources that you might be eligible for. And there's also going to be a homeowner assistance expo sponsored by the Treasurer's Office tonight at Community Action Agency from 5 to 7. If you have individual questions, if you want to try and complete an application, I will be there, legal aid will be there, the county will have officials there, housing counseling agencies will be there, and Derek's group, the National Appraisal Bias Task Force, will be there too. So those are the property tax assistance programs that we have available right now. As Jill and Bridget and Derek has mentioned, this problem isn't going to go away. Homeowners are going to be struggling with these property tax bills for many years, and it's going to take everyone to help keep our low-income homeowners housed. There are a couple of different advocacy points that I want to bring up to this group and all of our panelists. First, as Jill and Bridget mentioned, changing the property tax valuation process in Ohio would require a change in the Ohio law. We need to be advocating for, or through our Ohio senators or Ohio House representatives, to do what Columbus can do to help our homeowners here in Hamilton County and the Cincinnati region. You can find a list on the Housing Our Future webinar page of how to contact your local representatives. 2 of the important things from legal aid's perspective that the state legislature could do right now to help homeowners. 1 is address the unconstitutional funding of local schools, as the auditor and the treasurer have mentioned, and also reforming the homestead exemption. So as I talked about, the homestead exemption used to be much more meaningful for homeowners when our valuations were lower. Right now, with the valuations being so high, that homestead exemption that had been a lifesaver for homeowners, it might not be going far enough, especially in our neighborhoods that I showed at the beginning that are seeing those really high increases in valuations. our West Ends, our Evanstons, Westwood, and places like that. So we would like to see that exemption amount for our low-income homeowners and our disabled homeowners just raised immediately to $50,000. That'd be about it would be doubling what the amount is, but as you see on those slides, our property valuations have also doubled or close to doubled in a lot of our neighborhoods. And those are the neighborhoods that we have the most low-income homeowners in also. Also changing the homestead exemption, so it is tied to valuation increases in the future instead of inflation increases. We all know housing is a special beast, and it doesn't necessarily increase in value the same way that the general inflation does. We want to make sure that that homestead exemption stays as valuable no matter what the valuation does for the markets. That's at the state level, and the state does hamper some of what we can do here at the local level. But we also can't sit here in Cincinnati and Hamilton County and wait for the state legislature to act. Our homeowners need help now. We are seeing an increase in calls at legal aid from low-income homeowners who cannot pay these increased property taxes. They don't have the extra hundreds of dollars in their budget to pay their taxes, and they also are going to really struggle to find other places to go if they can't afford to stay in their homes. So I think it's time to be creative in what tools everybody on the panel, everyone listening to this webinar has that can help our low-income and moderate-income homeowners. We are getting an increase in property taxes, which means that our local governments are going to see an increase in revenues from these taxes. I know that all of our governments are strapped for cash, and there's lots of different valuable resources that need to go, lots of valuable programs that need to be paid for from the revenues. From legal aid's perspective, we want to see some of that increase in property tax revenue that is being paid for partially by our low-income homeowners, the ones who are going to be struggling to make those bills, go back to helping homeowners through assistance programs. Because assistance programs that we have right now are about to run out. I would be surprised if either of the two programs that I mentioned will be available in the summer for when the June property tax bill is due, unless they are able to find more funding. Happy to talk to anyone who would be interested about what an assistance program for homeowners going forward could look like. It could be a one-time help for people who experience emergency costs and can't pay their bills like the current programs are. We could also look at something that would provide gap funding for homeowners who, for the property tax increase amount that they've experienced in the last year, so that they could keep paying their property tax bill at the rate that it was last year. And the assistance program could help cover the remainder amount that is due based on the increases this year. Could also look if there's anyone who is interested in a patient lending model. So having a lender loan homeowners money to pay the property taxes and have those loans become due at the time of the transfer of the property. Now that is going to affect homeowners' equity in the property if those loans have to be paid back in the time of transfer. But when we're looking at just keeping people housed, keeping people in their homes, in their neighborhoods, we need to be thinking about all the possible options. This isn't the time where we can be thinking narrowly. We need to have everyone at the table and everyone at the table thinking about all the different ways that we can help our homeowners.
Stacy, thank you. Thank you so much. And I think this is a great opportunity right now to segue to some questions that were posed to our treasurer. And what are the consequences for people who cannot pay their taxes? What happens to a homeowner? And what does the discretion that the treasurer has in dealing with tax delinquencies? So Jill, would you be able to respond to these questions?
Yes. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of leeway in dealing with these things. Tax delinquencies, unfortunately, outside of the payment plan, we have very little at our disposal to help. we send a number of reminder letters, including information on applicable nonprofits that might be able to help. And then eventually your house, the tax lien against your home will be sold, at which point you could also possibly enter into another payment plan with the company that purchases it. Foreclosure does happen. It takes quite some time usually. It's not a fast process, and there are some off-roads on it. So, you know, again, our hands are tied. We have decided, however, in working with legal aid, that we have not been selling tax liens on properties valued under $75,000. We've been able to make that determination. So that's one thing we've done to help.
Thank you. There's a series of questions around when your mortgage is still held by a bank, it's held by a bank, and the taxes are paid through the escrow. How does the tax bill get shared with the owner, and how would the owner have access to? Well, let's answer that question. The tax bill. If you don't bill it to me directly, but it goes to my mortgage company, how do I see that?
You are free to call our office to find out what your tax bill would be. And you can also probably find that information on the auditor's website as well. And we can send you a copy of the bill from our office.
Okay, so contact your office or go directly to your website.
And Rhonda, I'll jump in too on that. You should be able to call your mortgage servicer and they should be able to give you information about your escrow account.
Okay, great. Thank you. Derek, there were a lot of questions around the Board of Revision process and how do you appeal property valuation through the Board of, if taxes are paid through the mortgage company, and what is the cost of the appraisal? And I saw in the questions in the chat that someone mentioned their appraiser was around $500. So could you speak to that?
Sure. Again, Stacy kind of answered the question around the mortgage and the taxes. There's an escrow, and that escrow would change over the change of the taxes. So the mortgage company knows what the tax bill is, and they would change your escrow amount. So your payment would change. As far as the cost of the appraisal, the typical fee is between $350 and $400 for a single family. There may be another way to do it, but it probably is the best way to make sure that the appraiser gets in the property and does a full analysis of the property to assure that the value that they're getting is accurate. So hopefully that answers your question.
And I noticed that you did put in the chat a telephone number where you could contact for the list of the best appraisers.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, because the most important thing is for the appraiser to have an initial conversation with the property owner to determine different characteristics of the property, as well as understanding any improvements that the property has or has not had over the years. So if a property hasn't had any improvements over 15 years of time, and then it's being compared with properties that have been renovated or updated, then we know that's not comparing apples to apples. But the auditor may not know that because they haven't been in the property. So sometimes properties get lumped into what we call a bucket or an area. And because of that, their value may be higher than what it actually is.
There were some other questions. Thank you, Derek. There were some other questions around the form of evidence that can be used at the Board of Review. So you mentioned some, but there was questions, are there other evidence and are photos sufficient?
Well, based on what's on the auditor's page, and she can speak to this as well, you really can bring any evidence that you feel is going to change the course of the value of the property. So you can use anything. It basically says these are examples that the auditor gives, but it doesn't give any finite what, and the sun's coming through my window. So it doesn't say specifically you can't use something versus something else, but we recognize that a true appraisal valuation is probably the best tool But depending on what your circumstances are with your property, as I mentioned, if your property is a shell and you take pictures of the interior of the property and share that with the auditor, that may be significant enough evidence to change the value determination. And then someone mentioned in the chat about multifamily. So then you're going into whether or not what income the current rentals are, and how you calculate that rental income into actually a value. So again, you might need to produce your leases in that case. And again, primarily you want to look at the condition of the property so that your leases are supporting what you're charging, because your leases are what you're charging, but there might be a market rent that the auditor has used to determine that value. So each case is, independently different.
Okay, so who needs to appear at the Board of Review? There was a question, for instance, if you have a contractor that you've retained, would it be helpful to have that person also present?
Well, I can't speak for everything that goes on. The auditor might be able to say more who they want to represent the property owner. I think the property owner is the main party that needs to be there. If you have legal counsel, certainly you want to have your lawyer there to present. And then if your appraiser has presented a evidence through an appraisal report, you might want to have that person there. So again, if there's a contractor who submitted a contractor's estimate of repairs, it may be good to have that person there. Again, it's like going to court. You can have evidence that's paper, and then you can have evidence that people are saying that this is what we believe is the cost that's going to repair this home. So all that might be good. Yeah.
Okay, Bridget, thank you, Derek. Bridget, could you speak to that?
I unfortunately cannot go into a lot of detail about the Board of Revision since we have a seat on the Board of Revision and our designees do. What I can say is we try to give people a lot of guidance on our website and suggestions for what they can bring in. People will be scheduled for a hearing in this calendar year. We will have their case resolved in this calendar year. I think Derek is right on in outlining and explaining the process and different things that people can bring in. I will say that we believe sales are the best indication of value, because I did see a question in there about the difference between values and sales. And one other thing that I would also let people know is the Board of Revision has the flexibility to either decrease or increase or not change a person's value depending on the evidence that they bring in. But I would definitely encourage people to look at our website at hamiltoncountyauditor.org, click on Board of Revision. That's where you can find the forms, suggestions for evidence, and things of that nature for people to be able to be best prepared. And if they can send us their evidence in advance, that is the most helpful. It should be to us at least 10 days in advance.
Okay, thank you. For Stacy, will you be able to put in the chat the location of the meeting that's going to be held tonight?
Yes, of course.
Okay, thank you. Derek, we also had some, there is one other question. How much is, this may not be for you, Derek, how much is our increase in property tax affected by the Cincinnati downtown real estate issues due to people working remotely? I've heard each person who works downtown spends $51 more per day, which is pushing companies, banks to force back to office efforts. So anyone want to take that question?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. Whatever is going on downtown may or may not impact what's going on in your neighborhood or your community. So it just depends. If you're close to downtown, maybe it has some impact. But really, to support your value, you need, again, we typically say sales. Professionals, appraisers, we need supportable, validated sales. Because the neighbor next door or down the street property sold, it may not be an arm's length transaction. And if it's not an arm's length transaction, then it's not a valid sale and it shouldn't be used in your valuation. So that's some of the things that appraisers are going to do that's going to be way different than the process that the mass appraisal process requires.
Thank you for that. There's another question. If the reappraised value was not finalized until December, why are we taxed at the value for a period first half of 2023? Was this a requirement?
We do it that way because that is how the state lays it out for us. The state legislature is the entity in charge of making all policy decisions relative to property taxes. So again, that's just another opportunity for advocacy with your elected state reps and state senators.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. And another question for you. How can I see the appraisal areas and nearby sales used in the mass appraisal process?
If folks get on our website, hamiltoncountyauditor.org, they can search through for their parcel of property, and there will be a link at the top left-hand side where their parcel is that says either sales or appraisal area. You can click on that and see the properties to which yours has been compared.
Okay, thank you. Stacy, this is a question on the map, and I'm not sure which map this may apply to. The map doesn't outline the western northern edge of the county. Does that imply those changes are the lowest change? I'm not sure if that was a property value or tax sale.
I know that neighborhood boundaries are always a hot topic in Cincinnati. So the neighborhood boundaries that are on that map are from the CAGIS website, but the percentage increases by neighborhoods is based on what is on the auditor's website. So you can go to the link, the source link that's on those maps, and see by neighborhoods and by county locality what the increase would be.
Okay, thank you. And back to you, Derek. Here's another question. If my bank did a full inside-outside inspection and appraisal in 2023 last year, will that be accepted for the Board of Revision process?
Okay, so that's a really good question. The information that I've reviewed at the Ohio Revised Code is that the best comps are 6 months before and 6 months after the tax date, which is it's 2003, 1/1/2023. So that's the best data. 6 months, typically in a fee appraisal, the best data is 6 months behind. But what I read at the Ohio Revised Code is that you can use, and the auditor can confirm this, that you can use comps after the tax date, 6 months before and 6 months after.
I think it's best to have an appraisal that has an effective date of 1/1/23, just like you.
Okay. All right. So does this answer this question? If we're appealing our comparable sales for the property tax appeal to be based on 2022 and 2023 sales only, this is based on a 1 year before and a 1 year after the lien date concept, or is a longer time frame also available, say 2 to 3 years before or after the lien date?
Okay, I can jump in on that, I think. Well, that's a good question. And that's what I said about 6 months before and 6 months after, and the lien date being 1/1/23. Again, you want to look at what's the best comps, and that takes an analysis. So you may have to go back further to find the best comps. That may be necessary, that may not be necessary. If you go back further away, then your support for that comp is going to be questioned more. So it's better to try to be closer to the lien date. But you can go back further. That's no different than a regular fee appraisal. You have to go back to find the best comps, then that's what you do. But that's what the research and analysis takes into consideration.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Stacy, this question is for you. What about homeowners? What can you do to help them if they have limited income and can't pay the $300, $400, $500 for appraisals?
Yes, so legal aid is working with Derek's group, the National Appraisal Bias Task Force, and LISC to run going to emphasize very small program to help low-income homeowners 60% below 60% AMI, area median income, to apply for board of revisions and have appraisals done. If you think that might be something that you would be eligible for, and based on this information, you think you might have a good case for the board of revisions, you can contact legal aid. You can contact the National Appraisal Bias Task Force. We will both be at the event tonight also.
Okay, thank you very much. Here's a question. If there's no sale price listed on the Hamilton County website for a particular property because that property was exempt from conveyance fees and no consideration was paid, is that still considered to be a comparable sale for appeal purposes based on the total market value listed on the website for that property? That sounds like a tough question.
Actually, it's really not. If it's not an arm's length transaction, then it's not going to fit it in the category of being a comparable sale. So,
It would not fit in the, all right. Thank you, Derek. Another question. These huge legal and expert witnesses will be incredibly expensive, and since it's applying to poor moderate income, it will make it impossible. And I think Stacy has done a great job in outlining the resources available through the various agencies, and also the forum that will be held tonight. Here's another question. I'm not sure if this was covered. Can I appeal my value at Board of Revisions even if I have paid my taxes this year?
yes. Yeah.
So I still
an
can
auditor,
appeal.
yeah, I think the auditor can maybe share as well. Yeah, you still can appeal it as long as you appeal it before the 31st of March. And then I assume there's going to be a reimbursement or a transaction to get the money returned or credited to your account.
That's correct. And Treasurer Schiller might want to speak to this also, but you have to file your paperwork, your request for Board of Revision by the 31st. You can send in your evidence following that, but we need at least 10 days before your scheduled hearing. If you have already paid your taxes and the Board of Revision makes adjustments to your taxes, you'll either get a credit or another bill, depending on what they decide to do. And then we'll either fix that in the second half of this year or first half of next year.
So the first half, if there's an adjustment to be made, it can be adjusted the second half of this year and the first half of next year. Okay, right. Bridget, I have a question. There's another question for you, and this is on the multifamily family appeal process and legislative question. And so the question is, and let me get to it. Multifamily affordable housing legislation approved by the state legislature last year, and how it will be considered for this appeal process. Could you speak to that?
I'd be happy to. So actually, the state legislature is still working on the structure of that, and they have a working group. I know that has been working on that, so we haven't received any final guidance on what their guidelines are. So that's one thing that's happening. I saw somebody else had a question about who to contact. I would say as a joint committee on property tax review would be an excellent resource. And Stacy, feel free to send people elsewhere if you are focusing your advocacy efforts. Certainly call your own state rep, your own state senator, because those are the people who are most familiar, with your neighborhoods and what's going on. And I would say if there is a bill that's being considered by a committee, call the members of that committee and let them know why this is something that's important to you and to your family.
Yeah. Bridget, those are the two places I'd recommend people starting, with your local representatives and senators, and then also with the property tax working group that'll be working throughout this calendar year. It's a joint committee with representatives and senators, and one of the chairmen is Senator Bill Blessing, who is from the Hamilton County area.
Thank you. And of course, we can go to the website of the Ohio State Legislature and get that information and who's in our area. So we encourage people to do that. There's another question around, when will the Board of Revision hearings be held? Are they going to be held throughout the year or when? Could you give us a time frame?
The Board of Revision hearings are going to be heard all the time. We expect to have a pretty heavy caseload. So we will be, on a pretty busy schedule. I know that somebody had questions about disabled folks or folks who couldn't make down. We can make accommodations for folks to do hearings over the phone. If people decide they want to appeal their Board of Revision decision, the BTA requires they use phones, which is why we still are using phones for that purpose, but we can make accommodations for people. And there are sometimes, occasions if there are issues with standing or something else, where we may be able to resolve people's cases before they even have to come in.
This, we'll go back to Stacy on this. I think we may have answered this, but which legislative house and committees should we contact to advocate for questioning the funding of schools and requesting changes in the state required property tax valuation requirement?
So I would start with that joint committee, the Joint Property Tax Working Group Committee that was newly formed this year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Stacy's graciously put in the chat that the Homeowner Assistant Expo is 5 to 7 at Community Action Agency, which is 1740 Langdon Farm Road, 45237. Thank you, Stacy. Are there any questions in the chat that you see, panelists, that I don't see that we want to answer and address for our participants?
Rhonda, I did see one from Liz about when talking about creative advocacy solutions for property tax assistance, how doing something like a patient lending model of a loan would impact generational wealth, especially in our minority communities. I just want to acknowledge that that is a real cost of something that we have to reckon with our communities if we're not able to find more grant money to help these property tax bills for our low-income homeowners. This is a crisis situation right now for our low-income homeowners, especially in those neighborhoods that are being hardest hit. We need to be thinking about how do we keep those people housed? And then also, if we can keep them housed and continue the growth of generational wealth, that is the best outcome. But we are facing some hard choices, and our neighbors are going to be facing even harder choices because of these property tax increases.
Yes. And I'm so happy that there's agencies that are stepping up and giving assistance in this difficult time. I want to ask one other question, and this one says, what is the protection for homeowners who dispute their home's value? How can homeowners be confident that if they dispute the value, the building inspector won't cite them for being out of compliance?
I can at least speak from the perspective of the auditor's office, and we have nothing to do with any local building departments except for getting their information from permits that people pull. So, we wouldn't provide that. But I mean, I would say the BOR is a public process. And so that's just something for people to consider also. It's public, it's quasi-judicial, just like Derek had outlined. And so those are all things for people to consider.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. And so before I turn it back over to Christian, I'd like to ask their panelists if they have any final comments that they want to make or guidance that they want to give to our participants today. And I'll start with Derek.
Yeah, my final comment would be, and actually just something that was in the chat. Someone asked about the hiring of the vendor who assisted with the mass appraisal or valuation process. One of the things that I think all counties can do when they hire the contractor who assists with the valuation is to bring on their team some local specialized appraisers who really know those urban markets, who can help give specialized instructions on what they can do to help make sure the model is covering as much as it can cover. So I think that is very important. That's just in the industry wide. There's a lack of diversity, so there's a lack of specialization for people who understand how the urban market really works. So it would be good if the auditors, not just our auditor, but our auditors across the state who have urban markets, and in some cases in rural markets where they need specialized experts, appraisers to help whoever they hire in recognition of supporting those specialized evaluation processes.
Okay. Thank you, Derek. Bridget?
Yeah, to follow up on that, so we have a team of appraisers in-house that has done this work. I know somebody said that it's an East Coast company. Actually, the group that we sold, much like other people, they're merging and consolidating, and so they have deep roots in Ohio. And again, we try to be transparent and accurate. So if folks think that we are off base, let us know. I put our email in the chat. You can also call us at 513-946-HOME, 513-946-HOME, and we'll be happy to be of service to you. And again, appreciate the opportunity to be with you all today.
Thank you, Bridget. Jill? Any final words for you? Guidance?
Yeah, so just to reiterate what we've all been saying, I think that the most effective thing to do right now would be to organize and contact lawmakers across the state, not just our local lawmakers, many of whom are very aware that this is a problem and have been trying to help, but truly the chair people of the committees that are relevant, and anywhere that you have friends that you can help organize would be helpful.
And Stacy?
Thank you, Rhonda. I appreciate everyone's work putting on this panel today. I think I like to push everybody on this panel and on this webinar to think about what resources you can bring to solve this problem. We are hampered at the state level by some of the limits in the Constitution and in Ohio state laws. That doesn't mean that we can do nothing. We need to be thinking creatively about where can your office, where can your agency, where can this local government provide support for these homeowners if we're serious about preserving homeownership for these low-income families. So I would like to challenge everyone to think about how you can make a difference and how you can help address this problem.
Thank you so much. And I personally want to thank all of the panelists for your dedication to the citizens of the greater Cincinnati area and your commitment to your work. And I also want to thank the LISC Housing Our Future for having the foresight and the passion and the diligence to put together this webinar series for our citizens. And I personally believe that when we all join together with concern for one another, our communities will be much better, our cities will be much better, and our citizens will be well-being. So thank you so much. I'll turn it over to Christian.
Thank you, Rhonda. And thank you again to our expert panel. Really wonderful conversation and information today. And we really appreciate your time. And we appreciate all of you who were able to join us today for this session. As a reminder, all of these resources will be available on our website in the next coming days if you'd like to go back and re-review the webinar or share it with others. And stay tuned for our next webinar, which will be coming up in the next month or two related to Housing Our Future topics. We always appreciate all of your participation and your interest, and thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.